Albert Einstein said, "Don't think about why you question, simply don't stop questioning." Welcome to Curated Questions. I am your host, Ken Woodward. And these questions are not mathematical equations, but rather a resource to encounter personal reflection and growth. As Tupac Shakur stated, even the genius asks questions. Now, let's engage the questioning community. Greetings. Ken Woodward here. Welcome back to Curated Questions. Together, we engage inquisitive humans about how they use questions to navigate and make sense of our world. I'm a fellow traveler and pilgrim on this journey, and I'm glad that you are here. Today's conversation is with Derek Sivers. That's Sivers. Derek is a unique human who consistently pushes the edges of convention, tests his assumptions, and embraces the new realities he finds on the other side. His identities have included musician, circus ringmaster, traveler, entrepreneur, father, programmer, speaker, and author. Derek gave 3 TED Talks in 2010, which have amassed 23 million views. His latest book, Useful, Not True, will be released in 2024. Although American, he is a world citizen living in New Zealand and is true to his word regarding answering emails. Derek, welcome to Curated Questions.
Sweet intro, Ken. Thank you.
Absolutely. A question I ask everyone is, when did you first learn the power of questions?
Age 19, my boss at the circus was this gorgeous, wonderful woman that I adored. And she said, "You have to read this book called Awaken the Giant Within by Tony Robbins." And because the referral was coming from her, I took it seriously and really ingested and internalized that book when I was 19 years old. And again when I was 21, and again when I was 23. I just kind of kept rereading it, and it just shaped the way I see the world. And its core message is about the importance of questions. Have you read it?
I have.
Okay.
I've appreciated Tony's focus on questions, and I think that's why I'm even doing what I'm doing.
That book, I just reread it last year for the first time in, 20 years. And it's very dated. Just warning to anybody, it's essential reading, but it's not a great book. There is a good book inside that book, with a lot of dated references. O.J. Simpson, the hero, Michael Jackson, etc. It's really interesting how kind of 80s the book is. So don't go expecting a great book. Go expecting a really good book inside a bigger book. But its focus on questions is amazing, especially for any listener of this podcast. You already get it. But I loved the message that your brain will answer anything you ask it. So be careful when you say something like, why am I such an idiot? Your brain will answer that.
Right.
But I also loved the point that you can deliberately make a habit of asking a useful question, like when something goes wrong, you say, "What's great about this?" Because in the moment, you're in this terrible state where you're thinking like, "Oh my God, everything's screwed. I'm devastated. I'm stuck. This is a disaster." And if you force yourself to say, "What's great about this?" I love the point that your first answer will probably be nothing. This sucks. It's terrible.
Yes.
And then you just keep asking. You're like, all right, come on. Okay, good job. Okay, that was your first response.
Yeah.
Keep going. What's great about this? Nothing. It's just bad. No, there's really, in this, for once, there's truly nothing great about this. Okay, all right. But what's great about this? And I love this idea of you keep going past your first answer. Let's not glorify our impulses. Let's not say that only your first answer to something is authentic. No, I think your first answer to something is emotional response. It's a dumb impulse, or it's a habit that you learned when you were a kid, to throw a tantrum at first when something goes wrong or whatever it may be. Um, you get past it. Your first thought is an obstacle to get past. And so you keep asking yourself healthy questions like, how can I make this a great thing? And then eventually you get to a better answer.
Is there an example that you can think of where you've done that recently, where something sucked and you're like, okay, hold on, let me keep at this?
Almost every day, definitely every week.
Hmm.
Um, past relationships, breakups, locations, situations with my kid, situations with my health, whatever. It comes up almost weekly.
Gotcha. We'll get to journaling, so I think that'll probably come back up there, but just your practice of being so intentional, I think are just an amazing example of really engaging with the questions in a deep way.
Yeah, and it doesn't have to be life size. It can be moment to moment, like a big traffic jam. You're like, ugh, traffic jam. You're like, you know what? I got some good music on this phone here. Hold on. Let me pull up something I haven't heard in a long time. Let me crank some old nostalgia music from when I was 15. Oh
Yep.
my God, what this does to my soul. There's just a way to ask yourself that. How can I make the most of this kind of question?
Mm.
Even just in the small moments. To me, that's all reframing. I love the subject of reframing. In fact, as I'm finishing my new book called Useful Not True, which is all about reframing, an early reader said, hey, can you give more examples of some beliefs you find useful? I said, well, basically everything I've written is that. I wrote a book about business called Anything You Want, and it's just a bunch of useful, not true beliefs that I use to think about business. And then Hell Yeah or No is a book about making decisions. And it's just a whole book of me sharing my beliefs that I know they're not true, but I find these beliefs useful to help think about how to make decisions. It's what I've been doing this whole time, is sharing a bunch of beliefs I find useful, but not true. These are all reframings. That's what questions do, don't they? They help you look at something in a different way.
Indeed. You mentioned the woman that gave you the book or encouraged you to read the book. What was the situation there? Was she the boss or?
Yeah.
And
She's one of my favorite people in life. She was my boss at the circus. I was 18, she was 36 or something like that. And she was not a mentor, but I met her at a very insecure time. It's tough to be 18.
Yeah.
I had just moved across the country to Boston from Chicago, didn't know anybody, suddenly got a gig with the circus. And she was so nice to me. And yeah, that's about it. She was really nice to me. She was really sweet to me. Yeah, I cared about her and she cared about me.
Mm.
And that's what I needed when I was 18, for somebody to feel like they saw me, or me to feel like they saw me and got me. And yeah, maybe so the fact that she was the one saying, hey, you need to read this.
Carried
This
a
is
lot
going to
of
be
weight
good for
then.
you. Yeah.
Beautiful. It's just the importance of relationships, right? And
Yeah.
the people that come across our path. Yeah. You were going to say something?
Years and years later, somebody said, you're very confident, aren't you? And I said, yeah, I guess I am. And they said, why? And I thought, why? Why am I so confident? And I had kind of like rewound my life. I was like, it was her, wasn't it? I was not a confident person, but she gave me my confidence. Like I was in the circus for 10 years. So
Yeah.
just for years, just every week over and over, she just kept being so nice to me and telling me nice things about myself. And eventually, I think after about 2 years, I started to believe them. I was like, yeah, I guess I'm a pretty cool person. So that was thanks to her.
Important lesson in that too. Yeah. Just that consistent water drop of encouragement.
Yeah.
Yeah. Let's talk about your writing and journaling. I've read that you write 2 or 3 hours a day in your journal. How do questions inform that in this little ecosystem of journaling? Because I know that there's a lot of questions involved in that process. What does that look like?
The main purpose of journaling for me was to question myself and what am I thinking? When I look at my old journals, that's all they are. Is I would only turn to my journal when I was confused and I wanted to straighten out my thoughts. I'd say, why am I upset? Or what am I confused about? How am I going to make this decision? What's the real point? What are my options here? What am I really after?
Okay.
How else could I think about this? What's the real point of that? Well, why am I doing that? Is that just leading to something else? And so if I look at my past journals, that's all you'd find in it. It would be a week of silence and then an entry like that. And then 20 days of silence and another entry about feeling confused about a situation. It wasn't until I was 42 years old and I was looking back at my diaries from 10 years earlier, wishing that I would have kept a daily diary during that extremely exciting time in my life when I had so much going on. I was in this tornado whirlwind of the music industry. The whole indie music revolution was going on and I was in the middle of it, but I was too busy to journal. Damn. I wish I would have kept a daily journal then. I so wish I would have had a daily journal. Just what I was doing, what I was thinking. It would have taken 15 minutes a day. And what a cool thing to be able to look back on. And so at the age of 42, I started keeping a daily journal, not just of my big questions, wanting to reframe something or figure out something or sort out things, but also just here's what I did today and here's how I'm feeling and here's what's on my mind. So there's that as a daily habit that I always do. But yes, now back to the core of it. Whenever I'm feeling, let's say, less than absolutely amazing about something, anytime I'm feeling kind of mixed feelings or not quite happy or extremely frustrated or lost or confused, I go to the journal and I just open up an empty thing, an empty text document. I start by saying all right, what's going on? I feel this and this and that. I'm not really sure what I want in this, or I'm upset because of that. Well, why is that upsetting? Because I have an expectation. Okay, so this person should have acted according to my expectations. What's another way to think about this? But then I don't just stop at the first one. It's not like, okay, I'm looking to quickly get this sorted. And so let's go. By the way, let's come back in a second to the subject of Sherlock Holmes. So I'll just keep asking myself questions that are basically intended to keep reframing the situation until I find a frame that feels good or useful. It's not always good. Sometimes, the most useful reframe is to realize I've been an idiot and made a horrible mistake.
Yeah.
And I need to change everything. But sometimes it's making peace with the past. There's something that's happened in my past and it's upsetting me still. And I need to ask myself some questions about it and reframe it until I find something that helps me feel at peace or gives me a useful takeaway that I can use in the future. So yeah, in short, it's all about asking myself questions and then questioning my answers.
Assuming that it's with all the same rigor, everything that you just did to get to that initial position in your questioning back on that resolution is that a fair assumption that you did 5 rounds of why, then once you get done, you're like, okay, this is where I end up on this thing. And then you do kind of another round of, is that true? And diving back into that.
Yeah, because we often, even privately, answer ourselves in a way that we think we should be answering. You might have just read a book about habits and it's still echoing through your head. And so now you answer all your questions in terms of that because that author's thoughts are still in your head. Or who knows, you've just watched a superhero movie and you're feeling heroic. You might be giving heroic answers to questions. But it might be bullshit. And so I think it's really healthy to also doubt yourself and your own answers and say, really? Maybe that's not true. What else could it be? You get to even try on different personas because who you are in your persona now is just a circumstance of your parents and where you grew up. And if you were born on the other side of the earth or adopted at birth, you would have had extremely different values and might not be so generous or might not be so selfish. And so it's interesting to imagine yourself as a very different person with different values that are different but not wrong, and think how a different person would handle this. And you could just look at it like a recipe, or not like a menu. You could look at it like a menu of options that you can choose from. There's not just one answer, and don't stop at the second answer, but keep growing and keep going. It's like, yeah, that was a nice
Yes.
slip. Keep growing. Keep going, keep growing. Past the first, past the second one. It's like the rule of brainstorming, right? Don't just try to quickly end the process. You keep going.
Do you come back or to the journals? Do you do any kind of review process where you're like, okay.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. Big time. It helps that I type fast and I like my computer. For what it's worth, my computers are usually offline. I'm not an internet addict. I keep it offline by default, and then I turn on the internet for limited times to go do something I need to do. I keep it offline by default. I don't use cloud services. I just keep everything local on the computer so that I can stay offline like that. And that's where I do my best thinking, is just letting my fingers fly into text documents that are intended to be searched again in the future. So I'll give you two examples. The first one is I realized that there were some thoughts that I kept coming back to. Say, 12 years ago, I was living in Singapore. My kid was born in Singapore. We moved to New Zealand, but I spent years kind of waffling on whether we should move back to Singapore or not, the pros and cons of that. So like in my daily diary, I kept bringing up Singapore again. Eventually I thought, it would help me if I had all of my thoughts about Singapore in one place so that I can review them chronologically and see how my thoughts on this have stayed consistent or changed. And so I started what I call the Thoughts On journal. So in the folder called Thoughts On, I have maybe 100 subfolders. Thoughts on home, thoughts on getting a dog, thoughts on Singapore, thoughts on relationships, thoughts on friends. And so whenever I'm having ongoing thoughts on a subject, I create a new Thoughts On folder and I categorize them in there. And it's come in really handy, say for just something simple like the big decision about whether to get a dog or not. That's a massive decision. It's going to be like 15 years of your life that's going to affect another sentient being. And so I thought really long and hard for years about whether to get a dog or not. And I dabbled with it. I took care of other people's dogs and whatnot. And I kept all my thoughts on it in there. And it was really useful when I'd find myself, say, I'd see a video of an extremely well-trained dog that looked really sweet and affectionate and wonderful. And I thought, God, I never did get a dog. I still really want a dog. And then I go back to my Thoughts On Dog journal. And I'm like, now, thank you. I've just been reminded of all the reasons I decided not to get a dog. I had forgotten. Okay, so that comes in handy. So I said 2 examples. So that's number 1. Number 2 is really personal, but I think it's okay to say here. I was in a romantic relationship for 2 years, and most of it was great. But then things were really hard. Like every day was really hard. It was like this everyday struggle. Just every time I'd come home, I'd kind of like stand outside the door for a minute and try to gather my strength my emotional strength to go inside to deal with this relationship. And I thought, but it's been so great in the past. It's just hard right now. And then it got really hard to the point where I said, I need to go away for a few days. And I went away for a few days, and because we were living together, went away for a few days, and I went and reread every single diary entry since the day we had met. And remember, my diaries are now like every day at the end of the day, I just share everything I did and thought today
Okay. Yep.
in one place. And when I reread 2 years of diary entries, I found that I had almost never been happy, that most days with her had been hard. And I had been selectively remembering the good ones, which were few, and thinking that this is a great relationship that's just currently hard. But when I went back and looked at the everyday journals, it had always been hard. And so that gave me the major, that helped me make the major decision to break up.
Wow.
And it was the right decision that was aided by that journal. And yeah, we were about to like have kids. We were about to like go like, planned pregnancy thing. And it was I'm so thankful for my daily journal that helped prevent me from getting into a situation where I would have been with somebody for decades that was just a bad fit. We just wanted such different things out of life that it was just a constant clash. But I hadn't seen it because I'm an optimist. And so I had been seeing the past through rose-colored glasses. And no, it's great. She's great. We're great. It's just something's hard right now. But thank you, journal, for that.
Oh, thank you for sharing. And I'm sorry that the relationship turned out that it did. And you're right.
No,
that
I'm
was
so
a
thankful.
saving grace to have that journal to go back and find out what was true. Wow.
Yeah. I'm extremely thankful that like almost every day, like, man, I'm glad I broke up. Whew. Wow. And and instantly I could just see like right after I did, just felt so much better, just elated that the difference between how hard it was every single day to be in that relationship and how amazing it's been to not be in that relationship. So that was just thanks to the journal. If it weren't for me keeping past journal entries, I would not have known that.
Wow. At this point, I'm assuming that if that inkling ever comes up to say, I'm going to pass writing on the journal, you're like, no, I must write. Absolutely.
No, I do. I don't miss a day. And sorry, if I do miss a day, then the next day I write what I remember of the previous day. I figure it's the next best thing.
Yeah. So the tactical is you just open up a text document and just start going at it.
Yep. That's what works for me. Paper could work. I understand some people prefer paper journals. I gotta say, the huge benefits of having it in a computer means I can search for words. In the past, okay, sorry, we're way off the subject of asking questions right now, but years ago, I got my kid a chemistry set, and he loved that chemistry set, and then we moved. It was during COVID. We moved from England back to New Zealand, and we did not pack the chemistry set. And he asked about it. He said, I really miss that chemistry set. And I thought, wow, I wonder where I even got that. So I was like, let me just search my diary for the word chemistry. It was somewhere in the years 2019, 2020, and searched chemistry. And there it was. It said, bought my kid a chemistry set today. And I looked, it said July 29th. So I just went to like my bank and like found my transaction receipts and went just July 29th. And there it was, the name of the shop.
Bam.
Where I got the chemistry. And I was like, all right, that was useful. That took like 30 seconds. And I found the exact same chemistry set because it was in my diary, So handy. I love this. I highly recommend it to anybody. And it only takes a few minutes, and I find it really therapeutic. It's like an end of the day kind of cleansing out. Maybe if something was troubling you today, it's really useful to take the 20 minutes or longer at the end of the day to work through, why is this bothering me? What's another way I could think about this? is that what's really bothering me about this? Well, how could I have reacted? How would I like it to be in a perfect world? What would be my ideal scenario? What would be the most generous way to look at this? Um, am I being too generous? Maybe this, have I been not selfish enough? Have I not been doing enough self-value, self-care? It really just helps at the end of the day to ask, just put aside a little time before bed to ask yourself these things.
It sounds like you're not necessarily going through these standard 5 questions because you've been doing this for a while at this point, that you're just noodling through it as the path leads. Is that right?
Absolutely.
Okay.
I've never had standard questions. In fact, that one that I said of what's great about this might be my only recurring question for decades. I mean, it's a way of thinking to say, how can I make the best of this? Or how can I see this in a positive light where I can get some benefit out of something that seems like it has no benefit? That's probably been my only consistent question over the years. I don't do any set of 5 questions for the day. That's silly. Well, silly for me. If you find it useful, good for you.
Absolutely. All right. So you mentioned Sherlock Holmes.
Thank you. The difference between a good detective and a bad detective. If you've ever read any Sherlock Holmes stories or watched any of the various versions, TV or film, the idea is that some crime or mystery happens. The local policemen send out somebody. They, well, there's the body, there's the gun, we're done.
Yep.
But then somebody says, I don't know, something feels wrong about this. Sherlock Holmes, can you come take a look? And Sherlock Holmes doesn't come to a conclusion so easily. He's like, all right, well, there's the body, there's the gun, but what else could it be? And he looks harder, and he goes past the obvious. And I think we should all be a little more Sherlock Holmes in our own questioning of our own psyches. To not say, why am I upset? Because that person's evil. There, it's done. No, hold on, keep going. Yeah. You push past things like a great detective. So it's a nice image to remember. Be more like Sherlock Holmes. Push past the first answer. Go beyond the obvious.
Yes. I was reading this book by Amy Herman, and she's got 3 questions. One is, what do I know? What don't I know? And the other one is, what am I missing? Or something like that. I don't have it right in front of me. But that idea of just coming into a circumstance and always acknowledging what don't I know, and then what am I missing, is just go, okay, I'm not going to just go with my first answer. It's been stated that in emergency situations, all of your first assumptions are wrong. And it's like, you only have little bits and pieces of the whole circumstance. Just give it time and keep digging. So yes, to all be a little bit more like Sherlock Holmes. Cool. All right. What questions do you think should be asked more or ignored?
Ooh. I guess I kind of said it earlier, that asking yourself constantly, what's another way of looking at this, or what's a better way of looking at this? Maybe asking another way skips the whole judgment thing. Let's put off judgment till later. What's another way of looking at this? And try to reverse it. Try to do a deliberate creativity exercise so that if you're, say, feeling that somebody wronged you, let's reverse it. Let me assume that I wronged them. That, in fact, they've been extremely wronged by me, and that's why they did what they did. Or, why am I stuck? Well, let me reverse that. Why am I not stuck? Let me list all the ways that I am not stuck, or that why is this not working out for me? Instead of saying, how can I make it work out more? How can I make it work out less? What would be a worse way of doing this? What would be the stupidest thing I could do right now? It really helps your perspective to force yourself into these reversing kind of answers. I actually think of it, I don't know if you ever played with a spirograph. Do you remember a spirograph where you'd put the pen in? And a spirograph, the reason it's interesting is it doesn't do an exact 180. It keeps doing kind of like these 170-degree turns. Right. Goes all the way around. So keep asking myself, what's the opposite of this? Or what's almost the opposite? Okay, now what's almost the opposite of that? And you go all the way around something and look at it from so many different points of view. I like doing that. I feel safe to say we all should do that more. I think that's useful for anyone, for any situation, always. What we should ask less are those harmful questions that have an assumption in them, like, why am I such an idiot? Why do things never work out for me? Why do I keep sabotaging myself? Why am I stuck in this awful place? You got to watch out for those assumptions that your brain will answer. Your brain will confabulate and come up with answers to anything you ask it.
So I think there's a connection here. And what goes into your thinking or your process for when you decide to just up and change? Because I mean, you've done it multiple times. What does that look like for you? I mean, I would submit most folks say, well, this is comfortable. I don't like this inconvenience or these pain points, but I'll just muddle through it. But it seems like you're like, no, I'm going to make a change and I'm going to make it happen. What is that magic or the courage associated with, I'm just going to do it, whether it's moving to a different country or
leaving my company that was all my security or whatever? Yeah. I value living a full life. Like at the end of my life, when I can tell that I don't have long to live, I want to be able to look back and go like, wow, I saw the world from many points of view. I did many different things. That is such a top value for me that when I've been doing one thing or staying in one place for a while, it actively feels harmful to keep doing the same thing I've been doing. Feels like that's going to diminish my chances of a full life by continuing to do what I've already done. I need to take a different approach, see the world from a different point of view. It could be a physical location. It could just be a mental approach. Say, okay, well, I've been a minimalist for many years. I think it's time I try being a maximalist. It's removing judgment. So instead of saying, I am this way because this is the best way to be, to say, well, I have been this way, so I should try another way of being. And that's so important to me that I get past any initial discomfort from the switch. So that's what really went into my decision to sell my company. So sorry, audience, if you don't know my background. So
no, let's dive into it.
It'll just take a second.
Give a little bit of the backstory because I got a
when
question.
I was 29 years old, I started a music distribution company because I was just a full-time musician selling my music, and people asked if I could sell their music too. And so, I accidentally started a music distribution company that, because nobody else was doing it, this is like 1998, 1997, 98, nobody else was doing anything like that. It instantly became the largest seller of independent music online. For 10 years, I had 85 employees and millions of dollars and hundreds of thousands of musicians using my service. And after 10 years of doing it, I felt this thing that we're talking about, which is like, I've been doing this too long. Yes, I could make way more money by continuing to do it, but I want a full life. I don't want to keep just doing the same thing in the same place. And so I made myself leave. And at first I was just going to quit. I was like, just going to walk away. And then I was just going to shut it down. And then a friend of mine said, you idiot, you know, you can sell a company, right? You don't have to just shut it down. I went, oh, right. So then I was like, but I don't want to sell it.
Okay.
So my second idea was, I'm going to do it like Willy Wonka. I'm going to hide 5 golden tickets into 5 CDs and announce to the whole world that, you know, the new owner of CD Baby will be whoever finds one of these golden tickets. And then, you know, I'll just have to push them into rivers of chocolate or whatever. And then again, a friend said, no, seriously, you're being an idiot. You can sell it. And I went, really? So then I looked into selling the company. I went, oh, okay, yeah, that'd be nice. So I sold the company, but it was It was yanking out my whole identity. I was Derek at cdbaby.com. That's who I am. And it felt like this is the learning, growing experience to remove the thing that I'm leaning on so that I can venture off a new direction. Maybe because of this value system I got from reading Abraham Maslow as a teenager, the pyramid of self-actualization.
Mm.
And trying to be all that you can be. Abraham Maslow had a little quote that said something like, every day you're presented with a choice between safety and risk. He said, make the growth choice 100 times a day. And I like that. Just like even at like day-to-day little moments. What's the thing I usually do? What would be the uncomfortable thing? Well, doing the uncomfortable thing is the growing experience. And so every day I try to choose that choice. And then even on the big scale, I looked at my options when I was feeling done with my company. I said, well, I could just remain the owner. And I would be the owner. I just don't work there. I'll just own it. It's like, all right, that would make me a lot of money, but I wouldn't be growing. I'd just be doing the same shit I've been doing for 10 years. The growing experience would be to walk away and into the void and have nothing waiting for me. That's scary as hell. So therefore, that's what I should do. So same thing with moving countries. If it were just up to me, I think I would be living in Saudi Arabia or India right now or something like that. But I have a kid that I adore, and his mother does not like traveling. So I want to be with him every week, and so does she. Therefore, I live in New Zealand, which is a safe, comfortable, beautiful place. But I am yearning to go live somewhere less comfortable right now.
Do you have any idea why you are so willing to just challenge? I mean, that is outside the norm. And we as a species are normally about comfort. I've got a cousin that is in a similar way. He's made decisions every couple of years to move. He's moved a little bit around the country, but he's like, nope, I got to move. Every couple of years, I need to move. And he's changed which name he goes by. When he changes a company, he's like, okay, this is my first name. Now I'm going by this other name. And it's in that similar vein of, no, I got to have change. And I'm going to do this intentional. There's going to be some uncomfort, but this is what it looks like. Where does that come from? And then certainly you've nurtured it. And so while there's still the uncomfortableness on the spectrum and uncertainty and such, I think that there's, for you, because you've done it so much, there's at least a little bit of, I've done something like this before and I'm not going to die. The odds are pretty good I'm not going to die. But even that initial thing, so the first 2 or 3 or 4, it's a greater, quote, risk, I guess, because of the unknown. But where does that come from?
Your cousin sounds like my kind of guy. It's, I think, just valuing the long-term view and consequences. So if you choose comfort, you get acclimated to comfort, which then makes you weaker. Because as you get more acclimated to comfort, you become less and less capable of handling discomfort. And so if I'm thinking long-term, I do not want life to be easier. I want to be stronger. And so I deliberately keep choosing situations that are uncomfortable to keep strengthening myself so that I can be happy in a wider variety of situations. I was going to say any situation, but no, come on. A wider variety of situations. That to me is just obvious and rational. Get stronger instead of weaker. Or ongoing blips of discomfort and acclimation over and over again to strengthen yourself instead of just sticking with one that you know. But yeah, you're right. Thanks for reminding me. I have been doing this since I was a teenager. I had a little rule of thumb that says whatever scares you, go do it. And I live my life by that,
Mm.
whether on a tiny moment-to-moment level, like, oh, wow, that woman is gorgeous. She's intimidating. I'm scared to talk to her. And I go, oh, I'm scared. Okay, I'm going to go do it. You know, that was me
There
at
we go.
18
Off
getting
we
the
go.
courage to talk to the hot girl.
Yep.
And then at age 20, I graduated college early. And I was like, well, the scary thing for me to do would be to move to New York City right now. I don't know anybody in New York City. It's the big scary place. So here I go. And living in New York City every day, it's like, well, the scary thing would be to go up to that band on stage and ask if they need a new guitarist, or walk up to that music industry executive that I recognize and give him my demo tape or whatever, you know. That was me in New York City in the 1990s, 90s. I just kept doing this. And yeah, kind of like your cousin, every 2 years I feel like, all right, that's enough. Living this place, I want to live in a different place. Even if it's in the same town. Like, I've been living in an apartment in Union Square for a while. Now I want to try living in a house in the country for a while. I've been in a house in the country for too long. Now I want to try living in Union Square again, or whatever. Just to change it up, just to keep seeing the world from different perspectives, like we're talking about with questioning. What's another way to see this? What's another way to see this? You can do that with your life choices. Yeah, and you could keep pushing into discomfort, which then gives you the ultimate security of feeling strong and capable. That to me is a greater reward than the short-term reward of comfort.
Beautiful. Now, you also mentioned identities. So this is kind of staying in the same area of conversation. So I've gone through some identity shakeups here in the last few years. Okay. And yeah. And it's been really hard because you've got about 6 months on me in this human experience. So we're right about the same age. And so now it was late 40s. I've had this consistent set of identities. And then I started to learn, and identities shifted, and is brutal in doing this shift and becoming someone that, historically, I would never have talked to, or I would have had very critical judgments about necessarily who I've become or some of the identities that I've taken on versus who I had been. But I found out 18 months ago that I have a sister that's 5 years older than me. Yeah, that look. Yeah. Wow. That's pretty much, it's like, whoa, hold on just a second. My dad, this lovely guy, and he's got the identities of the morally right thing, and he passed away in 2010. And so now I'm like, well, what do I do with this? Because there's this whole identity of who we are as our family and the values. And now I'm looking at this wonderful woman in front of me who is my older sister, who I lost half a century with. But it's having to contend with this crumbling identity. So there's been a bunch of these. Or I guess what might cause you to set aside an identity? I know that you gave up your guitars a few years ago. Clearly, this is setting aside an identity where now they're not sitting there. What does that look like for you? I was
probably influenced by musical role models like Miles Davis, David Bowie, and maybe even artists like Picasso that did a certain style for a while and then said, okay, now in the name of artistic growth, I need to push myself to do a new style. Miles Davis is a great example of that. He was the man for bebop trumpet. He was right there alongside Charlie Parker in the heart of bebop. And then he pushed himself out of that to do the cool jazz thing. And then he pushed himself out of that to work with more orchestral things with Gil Evans. And he pushed himself out of that to do this like rock band. Even losing fans the whole time. And even knowing that he might be bad at this, like even though he was an amazing bebop trumpet player, he might not be a very good rock band trumpet player. But it's important for personal growth to explore different sides to yourself, or just keep not resting on your laurels. I don't know. So maybe just growing up as a musician, hearing these stories, I was going to say parables, fables, because we extract lessons out of them. I think that probably shaped the way I see the world too. But yeah, anyone can just do it as a choice. And identity-wise, it doesn't even have to mean leaving all your friends and family behind and moving to Mongolia. A friend of mine in Los Angeles that absolutely identified as a musician through and through. She moved to LA to become a famous musician. And in her struggle to be a professional musician, she got a job at a music magazine. Just because she met somebody from the magazine, they hired her to do something, and eventually they put her into doing sales, and she was pretty good at sales. And after years of pursuing a music career and feeling like through and through, I am a musician, this is who I am, I've got this little day job doing sales for a music magazine, but really at my core, I'm a musician, and I'm only working here to get more connections in the music industry. Eventually she said, you know what? I think I'm feeling done trying to be a musician. I also play in this cover band in Long Beach on weekends where I just get up and sing the 80s hits and people love it. I'm just going to keep doing that. And she ended up getting a big-ass sales job at Time Warner for big money because she was really good at selling for this little music magazine. And that was this huge identity shift for her to say, I'm going to take my sales job seriously now. And suddenly she was in corporate sales. And then after doing that for a few years, she shifted into the new world of 3D printing at the time. And she left her safe, cozy job at Time Warner for a sales job in a 3D printing company and just crash coursed on this subject she knew nothing about last week. Suddenly she's just reading all the books and going to all the events and watching all the YouTube videos about 3D printing and becoming an expert in 3D printing and just made this shift again. But all of that was while living in Los Angeles with her family, just making these career shifts, which of course create identity shifts. So it doesn't always have to mean throw it all away, move every 2 years, go to Timbuktu. It can just be different approaches. Here's another one. A friend of mine who was an alcoholic and finally admitted that to herself and went to AA, and then also had been out of shape her whole life and started exercising a lot. And now she actually includes the word athlete in her self-definition, not just fit, athlete, sober. And now that's like a core definition of hers. I am sober. That's a different level. So she just realized I'm an athlete and I train like an athlete. I am an athlete. It's like, damn, that was a big shift. I've known her for 15 years and she did that shift about 10 years ago and it's stuck. And she's been a very urban, central Manhattan person this whole time, and she's just about ready to move out to the Colorado countryside and make another big identity shift. Location-wise, I think she'll still, of course, be the sober athlete. But yeah, these identity shifts are, I think, a wonderful part of living a full life, you know? I mean, that's just my definition, you know, need to take my values on. But for me, I love these things at the end of your life, feeling more empathy and compassion and connection with different people in different walks of life because you've walked a bunch of different ways yourself. It helps you be less judgmental.
How have you encountered questions in these different places? So there's a couple different ways of looking at this, or if we can explore. One is this country over here thinks a lot about this kind of question, and this one over here doesn't care, so they completely ignore it. So that's one. But then there's different countries, cities that really just answer questions completely different. The same question, but they just see it completely different. I know many Asian countries, if you slight someone in the respect and honor, that is almost unforgivable, is my understanding. But over here in America, we may just shoot you if we don't like it. But honor, it'll look different. What does that look like with all the different places that you've lived? Any particular
Yeah.
things come to mind?
Moving from California to Singapore. For the first 6 months or so, I felt that they were wrong and I was right. And it didn't help that I had just
Mm.
sold my company for a ton of money and people were kissing my ass telling me I was right. And so suddenly I'm in Singapore and I meet all these people that would say things like, "Oh, I always wanted to be a musician, but my parents told me no, that I had to go to law school. So I stopped making music and I'm a lawyer now." And I'd say, "No, you're wrong. What are you doing? That's stupid. No, if you want to make music, you got to make music. You got to do what you want to do. It doesn't matter what other people say, blah, blah, blah." And for months I went on like this. But living in Singapore for 2.5 years, I was extremely social. I sat down one-on-one and had conversations like this, except more, not interview, but real two-way conversations with about 500 people in 2 years. So I got to know a lot of Singaporeans. And it took a few months for it to sink in as they explained to me um, why the selfish whim is not always the right thing to do. That it's the greater good. You do what's best for your family, and you do what's best for your community or even your country. Even if your personal mood might say, "Oh, I want to make music," different cultures value and devalue different traits, like your current mood might be at its peak valuation on the coasts of America, let's say. Your current mood is everything and needs to be honored. I don't feel like serving a good coffee today. I'm being authentic to my true self. And in other places, your personal feelings right now are just passing whims. It's like learning a lesson from meditation, where you sit still and you feel emotions come into your head and you let them go, and you feel thoughts come into your head and you let them go. You don't need to act on every
Yeah.
thought and every emotion you have. And I saw the wisdom in this. I went, okay, I get it now. Thank you. So I now no longer think that following your current whim and emotion is the imperative, necessary thing to do. I see it as an option. I don't see it. I'm not now saying that it's bad and that doing what's best to your family is always the right thing to do, but it's cool to see you have a choice of different ways of looking at this. So, back to questions. I guess you could say in Singapore, a common question is, what's best for your family? What's best for others? In Chinese cultures, status is very highly ranked or valued. So, big decisions are often made by what would give me more status. Would buying this thing give me more status? Would this job give me more status? Status is very, very important in Chinese culture, whereas maybe it means nothing in California culture. In New Zealand, it's all about taking it easy. New Zealand and England are very, very similar. It's kind of very domestic. I mean, most people here are from England, Scotland, England, the British Isles. So have this kind of British mentality of taking it easy, but then you mix in a little kind of South Pacific surfer, living for the moment culture, and then you have New Zealand culture. Okay, but back to questions. It's really interesting to me that some countries' cultures have a culture of questioning things and not questioning things. Have you heard about, I think it was in the, Malcolm Gladwell wrote a story about the Korean airliner that crashed,
On the periphery
47
of the memory,
commercial
yeah.
Korean Airlines or something like that. Crashed, and when they listened to the black box, the senior pilot was making a big mistake. But in Korean culture, the junior pilots do not question the senior pilot. He is the senior, so what he says goes. And it was somehow apparent that the junior pilots knew that the senior pilot was making a big mistake. There was some indication that they were aware, but culturally, they just couldn't question his decision. And so the plane crashed and everybody died. But then there are cultures like Germany and even Israel, I found, that some of the most interesting conversationalists you'll ever meet, because it's this constant questioning of everything. Even as in a friendly conversation, you'll say something and the other person will say, well, no, that's wrong. That's not right. Well, I think you're being full of shit right now. Think about what you just said. That's not right. And it's friendly, but pushing back. And damn, it makes for a more interesting conversation than somebody, say if you're talking with somebody that might be smart and interesting in Korea, but if you're seen as having higher status, they'll just say like, oh, yes, yes. They'll just agree and not question what you're saying. They won't push back because that would be incredibly rude. So I like having conversations saying what you're saying is not rude, because I feel I learn more from those conversations. I like when people push back and challenge me. In fact, even my email inbox, some of the most interesting emails I've ever received have been from Germany, from people like a stranger out of the blue. When I had defined myself as an introvert somewhere on the about page of my website, a stranger out of the blue emails me from Germany saying, yeah, I don't think that's true. I think you might want to look at that. He said, you might feel like an introvert, but he said, you shouldn't pigeonhole yourself like that. You contain multitudes. I went, okay, thanks, Hans, whoever you are. And I actually did think about it later that night. I went, wow, Hans has a good point. Why am I limiting myself to saying I'm an introvert and that's that? And I really appreciated that this stranger emailed me out of the blue to challenge me. Challenge, that's a good word. Questions are a challenge.
How do questions inform slow thinking?
Ooh. That's back to Sherlock Holmes. The local detective just wants to make a quick open and shut case. Sherlock Holmes can take his time. In fact, I think that's my definition of stupidity, is jumping to a conclusion. When someone's being stupid, it's because they want to jump to a conclusion. They don't want to think it through. Somebody's acting rude, they say, that person's an idiot. There, it's all wrapped up, it's done. That person's an idiot. Taking another minute or two to think it through, saying, well, why do I think that person's being rude? They're violating my values. Could it be that they have different values? Are they acting in a way that they're proud of right now? Do they want to be this way? Or are they at their wits' end and short-circuiting and acting in a way that they don't actually want to be acting either? If you think it through for another minute, you're no longer being stupid. So slow thinking is taking
slow thinking.
a little longer
to
think it through, and that's being smarter to me, is taking a little longer to think something through. I do not value quick answers.
I heard author Ta-Nehisi Coates once say, from stage, I couldn't believe that somebody would say this. Somebody asked him a question. He said, I don't think I'm informed enough to speak on that. And I'm aghast. I'm like, whoa, no, hold on. If you're on stage, you're supposed to have an opinion about everything. And so it's just that, no, I don't think I have any value to add here. So I'd rather not.
I think that can be such a smart thing to say, is to say, I don't know. It shows that you're thinking, and it shows that the other times when you didn't say, I don't know, that they should be valued a bit, because if you don't know, you'll say, I don't know, instead of just moving your mouth anyway. You asked me some questions before our interview today. You sent me an email with some questions, and I sent you some quick answers, mostly to say like, oh, these 2 or 3 questions, I'm going to tell you in advance my answer for that is I don't know. So we don't need to go there. There's nothing interesting there. And I'm glad that I got to do that in advance, because you might have asked me a big, serious, loaded question like, tell me how questions have influenced your parenting. And you might have even framed it wonderfully and set it up for me, and I would have said, well, hasn't. That would have been the end of that. That'd be embarrassing.
I have no problem launching out questions, and if
Great.
they're a dud, okay,
Good.
so be it. Yeah, no problem. Regarding all these countries that you've been to, how many
none.
languages do you speak?
Just English. Now, I wish...
Really?
Yeah, in a perfect world, I'd love to be fluent in a few languages. My top 3 would be Chinese, Swahili, and Indonesian. But it's always been like 4th priority to me underneath other things. So it hasn't happened yet. Maybe it never will. We'll see.
As you've been in the different countries that you've lived, English has served you well enough where you've been able to get the things accomplished that
Yeah,
you
I've only
need
really
to
lived
with English, I guess.
for real in US, England, Singapore, and New Zealand. And all of those are English speaking.
Okay.
Again, this is a compromise with my boy's mother, who does not want to live in a place that doesn't speak English. If it were just up to me, I would only be living in places that don't speak English. I would only be doing that to push myself out of my comfort zone and make myself learn my target language by living there and refusing to speak English. But that's me. And being a good dad is more important to me than learning another language. So I choose being here with my boy in an English-speaking country, which means learning Chinese is 4th or 5th priority. And so it doesn't happen.
So in the days ahead, when you have wider options, do you assume that, yes, as you move to one of these other countries, that yes, you'll dive into
That's
the language
plan.
learning? And
that's what I enjoy daydreaming now, that in 6 years when my boy's 18 and off to university somewhere and doesn't need me around anymore, that I will go straight to, I don't know, Kenya, China, who knows where, and just make myself live in the new language and live according to a different set of values, kind of like your cousin. I don't think I'll change my name, but I like the idea of living in a different way for a while.
Gotcha. How has having a pet, or what has having a pet
we only
rat
got pet rats a
taught
few
you?
weeks ago, but yeah,
yes, all this is new, so love it.
I was against it at first. So we had pet mice, and even that I was against at first. The local pet store owner convinced me that they never bite, they make great pets, and we did. They were wonderful pets. We had pet mice for 3 or 4 years, and all the mice died. And as soon as the last mouse died, my boy said, I want pet rats. I went, what? Are you serious or kidding? He said, serious. I went, pet rats? And then he showed me some YouTube videos of how sweet and cuddly they are. I went, wow, okay. I lived in New York City where rats were something to be killed. I have killed many rats in my life. I have set many rat traps and dumped many rat bodies in the garbage and thought of them as just pests. And if you go to YouTube and search like cute, cuddly pet rats, you'll see a lot of people just scratching under their chins and little rats are, like going, they're like little kittens. And my boy really wanted this, and I went, all right, I also want him to have a full life, and rats only live about 2 years, so let's try it. So found a local breeder, got 2 boys, and I got to admit, for the first 2 weeks, I was thinking, what have we done? Oh my God, now I've got rats. But after about 2 weeks, I got to tell you, they really grew on me. As I sit here writing all day, I'd say like 5 times a day, 8 times a day, I go over and open their cage and I take them out and they like run up to my shoulders or like into my arms and I cuddle them. And one of them is more cuddly than the other and just loves just like snuggling into my arms. And just like when I scratch under his chin, he closes his eyes. And they're so warm and cuddly and affectionate. They lick my fingers all the time. And they're really sweet. Just in the past 10 days, I've really just something switched. And I really kind of fell in love with these 2 little pet rats. Yeah, they're affectionate and cuddly and sweet. They're really like little quarter-sized kittens.
Do have my own rat story.
Oh, cool.
I can only validate. Now, I'm sure that folks who have only the experience of the city rats are probably cringing. You can skip ahead a couple minutes. But my plan was I wanted a dog. My dad was like, no, we're not going to do a dog. That's too big of a commitment. So we went with a rat. So I had Squeaker the rat for 2 years.
Whoa! How old were you?
I would have been about 10.
Okay. Yeah, same as my kid. Cool. Okay.
And I would tuck my shirt in and let him ride on my
Wow.
shoulder as I would
Wow.
ride up and down the street on my bike.
Wow.
And then he would go
Yep.
down the shirt
Yep.
and run around inside, because it's tucked in.
Yep.
Very affectionate. And when I'd make pancakes, you got the dribbles, and you get these little tiny pancakes. So I'd put butter and syrup on there, take them in on the fork, and then pull off this big, massive pizza for him.
Yes.
And when I saw that, I was like, aha. Not a lot of folks actually embrace the whole rat adventure. So lovely to see it's been your experience.
Cool. Yeah, the shorthand, same thing with having pet mice, is I would tell people that seemed creeped out by it, I'd say, look, it's understandable. Imagine if you lived in, I don't know, Sudan, and the only dogs you saw were wild dogs. And then try to imagine getting somebody to be comfortable with a poodle. And the difference between a wild dog and a poodle is the difference between a wild rat and domesticated rat. They're the poodles of rats. And the pet mice, which are actually called fancy mice, they're actually called that. Domesticated mice are called fancy mice. They just come from a long line of being affectionate and sweet and cuddly. And very different from wild mice and wild rats. Highly recommended, especially anyone with a kid, because it can be a drag if, your 8-year-old kid says, I want a dog. And you say, okay, and you get a dog, and then you have the dog till they're 24 and they're off at college and they're long gone, and it becomes the parents.
We're living it right now.
Okay. I'm glad that they have this 2-year lifespan. I feel that probably matches his attention span of wanting pet rats.
That's fair. I know you're a voracious reader, and on your website you've listed a bunch of books and your extensive notes. And I want to thank you because I've read The Courage to be Disliked and The Sum, Tales from the Afterlife. I did that one on audiobook.
Nice.
So there were 2 thank yous, and they were lovely in their own right.
Cool.
So through all the books, as you scroll through the catalog, any particular books that handle questions in new or creative ways that come to mind?
Well, yeah, you mentioned the book Sum, S-U-M, by David Eagleman. I love that format of having 40 different answers to one question. The question of the book is, what happens when you die? And I just love that format of one chapter saying, here's what happens when you die. You awaken in a room and you find out that there's nobody there. And then the next chapter says, here's what happens when you die. You find out that you are an artificial intelligence program. The next chapter says, here's what happened when you die. All your atoms split apart or whatever. I love this format of making yourself come up with many different answers to one question for obvious reasons. The whole subject of this podcast. Forcing yourself past your first answer, past your second answer, and to keep going and to make yourself see things from different points of view. I love how the book Sum did that, and I loved it so much that that's the format for my book called How to Live, is a direct homage to Sum by David Eagleman. Because after reading his book twice and loving it, one day I was driving down the road and I went, oh my God, I want to write a book called How to Live in the same format as Sum, where each chapter says, here's how to live, and it has a strong opinion that says, this is the way. And then the very next chapter says, no, here's how to live, and has a very different answer, because that's what it's like reading the self-help books of the world, right? They all have a very different answer, and they're convinced that their way is the way. Just follow this methodology, and you will be successful and happy. And then another book, and it says, no, the complete opposite. Follow this way and you'll be successful and happy. And they're all right and they're all wrong and they're all just an option. And I thought, God, wouldn't that be fun to have that all in one book where every chapter is disagreeing with every other chapter, just like Sum by David Eagleman. So yeah, that book not only changed me but led me onto a 4-year project of writing How to Live.
Wow. I didn't realize that it had that deep of a connection. Wow.
Oh, yeah. The first page of the book How to Live says this book is an homage to the book Some by David Edelman. Most people miss that, but it's in the page before the table of contents where people are usually just thanking their wife.
Gotcha. I highly encourage folks signing up for your newsletter or your mailing list, because you had sent out an earlier look at useful, not true, and appreciated that. There was definitely one in particular. There was an immediate application for me. I was having a terrible drive into work, commute-wise, just a lot of voices in my head, and that particular chapter on aliens, the concept of the aliens. One of them can hear what's going on in your head, and the other one sees what's going on in the outside. And the aliens go back very confused because the two different worlds. But that was super helpful. And so it immediately did some application on that. And I've referenced it or thought about it often when I start to go down this path.
Wow. Thanks for telling me that. Actually, that's really helpful because I had just axed that chapter. And because I thought like, oh, I don't know, is this weak? So hearing you say that makes me, I'm going to go take another look at that. I'm still making last minute changes to the book. So yeah, that helped a lot to hear that you say that. Thank you.
You're quite welcome. Yeah, that one certainly resonated with me. I don't know, maybe it's just the aliens and maybe we're finding out that they're real. I'm not sure, but it was helpful to me.
Right. Yeah, thank you. The useful, not true. Well, like I said at the very beginning, it's been underlying everything I've written about for over 10 years now, that I'm deliberately choosing beliefs that are useful. Not because they're true, but because they're useful to guide my thinking or my actions in the way that I want it to go. So I'll choose beliefs for the actions they create. And people kept challenging me on this, saying, wait, why are you saying you believe this? That's not true. And I'd say, I know it's not true. I believe things because they're useful to me, not because they're true. What the hell is true anyway? Anybody that believes anything, there's somebody else that believes something else. So what? They're wrong and you're right, or vice versa? Come on, true. Everything's just a perspective anyway. So
I appreciate the name because it is so concise. And that's been something that I've also thought about, is that concept of whether somebody else on the other side of the world believes something different than me. But in this case, if I was to believe that, it would drive a particular behavior on my part. And that would actually be helpful right now and to get me through whatever. And where all this is going is I guess I marvel at the assumption at how much time you put into probably writing and rewriting and trying to eliminate every single word or phrase in your writing, because I receive it as so very crisp with all the fat taken out. Kill the baby, right? It's like, nope, I like this one. Nope, it's got to go. It doesn't matter because it doesn't fit, right?
Thank you.
Just for the succinct nature of your work.
Thanks. It makes me happier. It makes me prouder of a book. But mostly I think it's more considerate, because we've all probably read a book that should have been an article. And you think, damn it, you're like, come on, I got the point in 10 pages. Why did you need to go on for 300 pages? You didn't. So why did you? That was inconsiderate. How many, millions of hours of human time have been spent reading your page just because your publisher told you to make it longer, or you just wanted to talk longer, or you just wanted to say that you've published a 300-page book, not an 80-page book? It was inconsiderate to everybody that read that. You did not need to make it that long. So my books are basically just the good bits. Everything else, every sentence that doesn't need to be there has been axed. Every sentence needs to be there. I make it as short as it can be. In fact, I'm very excited that this next book, Useful Not True, might be my shortest one yet. That my books are usually about 100 pages. And I'm
Wow.
hoping that this one is going to come in at about 85 pages. We'll see.
Gotcha. Kind of tying that maybe to minimalism. Because I know that's at this point, as you had mentioned earlier, that's somewhat of an identity, or that's how you're living at this point.
Ooh.
What questions do you ask of an item
Right.
that's going to be added to your collection of stuff around your house, whatever that is? What is that rubric that anything has to go through in order to
question? Good subject.
become
Yeah,
one
nobody's
of
asked
your
me that.
things?
Anytime I think about getting something, I think really long term, like, am I really going to want to take care of that for the rest of its life, for the rest of my life? Do I really want that in my space? Will that complicate my life? Will that take up room? Will that make it harder for me to leave on a moment's notice if I want to move somewhere new, if I get some opportunity to, I don't know, start a new business in India? Would that hold me back? And there's a whole bunch of hurdles that an item has to pass before I'll say, okay, I'm going to let this item into my life. I take it very seriously because it clutters up my space, and now it's something I have to fucking take care of forever. Or it's going to sit there untaken care of. There's probably a better word for that. And then that's going to make me feel icky inside to see something that I bought that's sitting there unused. Just, every day I see that, it's just going to like, I bought that thing and it's just sitting there unused, and God, maybe I should be spending more time with this thing that I just decided to buy. Or now I'm going to have to sell it. I have to go to eBay and make a little ad and take pictures of it and get bids and then ship it. You know what? Never mind. I just won't get it in the first place. I know I want it, but not bad enough to deal with all of that. So yeah, that's why I hardly ever buy anything, is that everything has to pass through all those hurdles.
Is there anything in particular in recent history that has been I gotta have that?
You know, a big one that has been worth it is right there, like 5 feet to my left, is a big squat rack with the heavy weights and the barbell that I was going to the gym, but the nearest gym is in a shitty part of town. And I don't mean like a bad part of town. It's actually smack in the middle of the most commercial busy intersection. And parking always meant I had to like drive up 7 floors of those circular parking lots and park up on the 7th floor because I'd go there at 11 a.m. And I just would get cranky every time I'd go there. Just like, the traffic and I thought, this isn't worth it. I know I'm trying to avoid having a big thing at my house, but in this point, the benefits are outweighing the downside. So yeah, I have a big squat rack, which is huge and heavy and totally worth it. And the other one, actually, I am standing inside talking to you right now. I'm standing inside something that is the size of a phone booth that is completely soundproof because I was trying to record my audiobooks and the neighbor was mowing his lawn like all day long. And then I was like, well, I can't record my audiobook today. Hopefully tomorrow. And then the next day there was just some dog that wouldn't stop barking. I was like, well, can't record my audiobook today, maybe tomorrow. And I kept trying, but the sounds of the neighbors were coming in over the microphone. So I said, all right, I'm going to have to go into a recording studio. So I looked at the price of going into a recording studio, and all in all, it was going to be more expensive than just buying this soundproof recording booth. And so this thing is big and heavy. And these two things are right next to each other, my recording roof on my squat rack. And again, totally worth it. Like, I know this is going to be a pain in the ass. And yes, I know this will hold me back from moving on a dime to somewhere new. And when I do move, it's a pain in the ass to move. I've done it a few times already, but still totally worth it.
Well, it's absolutely paid off, because I would submit your audio quality is amazing. So thank you for the investment.
Thanks. Yeah, and sound is important to me too. And it's recording not just an interview like this, but Yeah, the audiobook version of my books or whatever. It's just nice to know that no matter what. Actually, right now, it's kind of hurricaney right here. I live in Wellington, New Zealand, which is officially the windiest city in the world. And this morning, it's been living up to its name. It's like almost a hurricane out there. Things are thumping against the house. I'm going to find out later what fell down this morning. But you can't hear any of it because we're in a recording booth. I love this. StudioBricks.com. I mean, obviously they're not paying me, but it's worth it. I highly recommend go to StudioBricks, BRICKS.com. They're actually made in Spain, and I had it shipped from Spain to New Zealand because it was worth it.
Nice. Okay. Shout out, and we'll tag them in the show notes, of course. So cool. All right. Well, in being respectful of your time and moving towards wrapping up, any other thoughts or encouragements about how questions might be used that we haven't touched on?
We didn't touch on this at all, and I didn't realize it till just right now when you asked. That I think most of us, not all of us, most of us have a tendency in conversation to talk about ourselves. And then you talk about yourself with somebody, and then that person tells you something about themselves. And I found it so useful and enriching to kind of bite my tongue, catch myself, and at the moment where I'm thinking of making a statement, instead I stop and I phrase it as a question. Now, I'll just pick a quick dumb example, but say I had a terrible experience while driving, since you were just talking about driving. I'll just say that. Instead of just saying, I had a terrible experience driving today, I might, whoever I'm talking with, say, like, how often do you have a terrible driving experience? Like, is driving usually terrible to you? And now we've opened up the subject. And I'm not being coy or withholding. I'm not waiting for them to ask me so I can, share my story. It might come up, but actually, even if it doesn't, it's fine. It's so useful to notice that I'm interested in this subject. So instead of just telling you my thoughts on this subject, to make it into a question with the person so we can have this two-way conversation about it. I love this so much more. And actually, it's thanks to Alicia Souza, Alicia Souza, an illustrator in Bangalore, India, who, in our conversations, she would do this to me. She would just make everything into a question. Like something would annoy her and she'd say, do you ever, does this ever happen to you? Or she would love a particular song and she would turn it into a question. Like, why do you think we love a particular song? And I noticed that I just loved having conversations with her because she would turn everything into a question. Oh. And I went, God, I want to do this too. I want to be more like Alicia. So, yeah, I think that could be a whole different podcast topic for another episode about the use of questions in conversation.
All right. Sounds like a plan. We'll have to do that. I just had Brian Fretwell on, and he's got a company called Finding Good. He's all about asking the questions as well. And one of the concepts that he has is that he calls finding the blueberries. And the idea is, this is our ancestor days, you found blueberries and you came back with them. Tell me about how you found the blueberries, because now the rest of the group can benefit. And it's less about what hardships you had or how you screwed up or you spilled some coming back. I'm fascinated because you just lived through hell, or you've just gone through hell. How did you do that? And really pulling those strings so it becomes kind of a self-centered curiosity. I appreciated his work. And one of the questions that he asks that he often starts off with is, what do you want more of? And I love that because while it's a direct question, it's also expansive. Because now it's like, what are you seeking more of in your life or on this particular topic?
I like that. Which, of course, then I'd be tempted to also make sure to ask the counter question of, what do I need less of? Or why do I think I need more? Is more the solution? Is less the solution here? Yeah, I like that.
In preparing for this, I was thinking about asking that question to you, but then I knew I was like, And then obviously we need to ask, what would we be less? Because I can just imagine Derek saying, why do we assume that we need more?
Yeah. It's fun to challenge the question itself, because people do often ask you these leading questions like, when I say successful, who's the first person that comes to mind? And I'd say, I don't think the first person's interesting. I said, shouldn't we think past the first, And it's fun to challenge questions themselves, and especially your own. So, yeah, fun subject. Thanks, Ken.
Indeed. So where's the best place for folks to engage with you and learn more about what you're excited about?
Only my website. I don't love social media. Does anybody? I just don't do it. sive.rs is my website. It's all there. And as you know, because you emailed me out of the blue, I like it when people email me out of the blue. I actually really enjoy it. I am living on an island in the middle of the Pacific Ocean. New Zealand is wonderful, but I think it's so fun to meet people from around the world that email me and say hello and tell me something about themselves. So please do.
And that's how we got here. So yes, he is legit, and he will answer those emails. And I appreciate that. That's how I got here. So yes, he's legit. He will answer those emails and appreciate that. Good deal. Yep,
Yeah.
appreciate that. Good deal. Well, Derek, thank you for the discussion. I appreciate you sharing how living with questions and seeking the edges of our conventions leads to a more inspiring life. And for those who have joined us through the gift of technology, thank you for being here. Questions changed my life for the better. Derek provided amazing examples of how to use questions in perhaps new ways that we hadn't considered before. Please take all you have learned here and be a light to those around you. Gratitude shout out to Beauty Pill for the show's music and producer Ben Ford for the technical help. This episode was recorded on Piscataway land. Please engage with this episode in some manner. Download, follow, save, like, share, or comment about something that resonated. This action ensures that we are engaging the questioning community. Until next time, keep questioning.